Vice! You dumbass! Start making sense, you rotten book, or you're gonna be sorry. Maybe I'll rip your pages out one by one, or maybe I'll put you in the goddamn furnace! How can someone with such a big smart brain get hypnotized like a little bitch, huh? Oh, Shadow Lord, I love you, Shadow Lord. Come over here and give Vice a big sloppy kiss, Shadow Lord. Now pull your head out of your goddamn ass and start fucking helping us!
NieR. NieR Gestalt? Replicant? NieR Replicant. Or just NieR. So whatever country you come from or whichever system you have, NieR is a great game that I urge everyone to check out. Particularly if you are a big fan of its sequel, Automata. A game I'll be bringing up a lot in this review, as without it, I would probably not have known about or purchased this first game, NieR. An upcoming remake of sorts under the title Replicant version 1.22474487139. Infinity will be on its way in the future according to Square Enix, so I thought I'd take the time now to recommend the original for all those like myself who missed out on this version initially. Or either of these variants or versions. I mean, were they going out of their way to confuse people into not buying this game? I'm only speculating, but it seems that all of these attempts at making the game appealing to everyone had the opposite effect. The middling to terrible review scores probably didn't help either, especially in the Western market. The entire project seemed a bit confused from its inception. At first, NieR was to be a sequel to the PS2 game Drakengard 2, and an introduction for the series on the next generation of Sony hardware. The game was conceived and completed over the span of 3 years, with Yoko Taro at the helm, and Cavia being the development studio with some help from Square Enix. It was intended to be a much smaller, story-based project, which is something that really shows in the final result. NieR is a strange beast all around. It's considered an action RPG, but I think that's a pretty big misnomer. Sometimes art can't be acutely fitted into a rigid genre. In my world, things are most interesting when they aren't afraid to bend or break these restrictive holds. Experimental music, films, comedy, it's all much more exciting when it can't be quickly defined. And that's NieR in a nutshell. experimental, and strange. There are a lot of ideas going on here, some that should clash, but oddly, they don't, and I applaud Yoko Taro and his team for somehow making most of these bits work in a reasonably congruent manner. Now, as I mentioned at the top of this review not less than 5 minutes ago, NieR completely slipped under my radar when it was first released in 2010, and if it weren't for its sequel, I probably wouldn't have played it, and boy howdy, am I glad I nabbed a copy of this, because I think it does quite a few things better than Automata. This review is going to be pretty sparse when it comes to specifics or details, as digging any deeper into the mechanics or story will ultimately ruin what makes this game so appealing. Instead, I've decided to produce this thing in order to showcase this wonderful game for the 30.5 people who will watch this video, and the 0 people who will subscribe and comment. NieR isn't a masterpiece, nor is it particularly amazing. It is, however, tremendously interesting, and had me engaged for the majority of the adventure. I say majority because, my god, do things take a while to get going after the action-packed, playable intro. Home. Library. Library. Home, library, library. So, in the version I have, NieR, this guy, needs to save his daughter who is fading fast from a disease. He's old and frankly, quite ugly. This haggard dude is by far the worst looking of any of the in-game characters, which is a bit off-putting as, well, you know, you're kind of forced to play as him throughout the duration of this journey and more. It's a good thing that you'll be staring at his back the majority of the time. Seriously. The Japanese Sony alternative is this more anime dude. Still not the best, and in this version the little girl, Yona, is your sibling, not your daughter, which is less appealing and effective in my opinion. I read somewhere that this was precisely the reason they changed things around. Apparently they thought Western audiences wouldn't understand or be as captivated by the sibling relationship or the look of the protagonist, so they altered things. I've got to say, from my perspective, I'm glad they did, both for the sake of NieR as well as Kane. Oh, Kane. Such a great character, and I liked the changes made to her appearance in this version. The way she looks makes her entire character arc so much more impactful. And I mean, Vice wouldn't have the hilariously abusive verbal ammunition to toss her way if she looked like this. Though I really shouldn't comment on that other version as I've not played it. Still, I have eyes, and mine are more inclined to be emotionally invested in the father-daughter variant than the alternative sibling one with slightly cuter characters. Your protagonist is a bit of a bore, but the majority of the ancillary characters really make up for it. Specifically, the companions he meets along the way. I can't think of a more lovingly written and performed cast of misfits portrayed in a video game off the top of my head. Each and every one of them feels meticulously planned out, and the terrific voice acting all around makes it even more engaging and memorable. The story and the way it's presented is worth the price of admission alone. It's sad, silly, poignant, and really quite remarkably told. Taro and company obviously spent a lot of time on the structure of this narrative, but there are also more than a handful of moments where they take the time to take the piss out of popular game tropes. It made me laugh just as much as it made me sad. Truly a unique tale. A competent story is fine and all, but for others like me, it's all about the gameplay. Well, that's where things become a contentious affair. Some seem to hate it, while others appear to find it inoffensive. I'm in the latter camp. The combat and overall mobility mechanics are passable, in my opinion, leaning towards good, but never great. Kavia crafted a pretty rudimentary fighting system here that harkens back to the 6th generation of games. It's not as bad as some would have you believe, but it also doesn't have a lot of depth, or leave much room for customization outside of a few interchangeable spells and buffs. Again, calling this thing a role-playing game is misleading. If I were expecting a game based on the style of NieR's description, I'd have been extremely disappointed. The character progression, combat, and exploration is very shallow in this game. It's not a RPG. As someone who isn't a big fan of the genre, I loved how quick and easy this adventure was to get into. In this version, you can even simplify things more by having the computer automatically adjust your character and weapon traits. Perfect for a guy like me who can't stand navigating menus, but yeah, it's not deep. This is not a RPG. I mean, unless you wrongfully consider something like Ocarina of Time or any Zelda a role-playing game, because this thing is more like that than anything that Square or Square Enix has released in recent years. This is all getting very confusing and convoluted. I do enjoy the combat for what it is. As a matter of fact, there were only a few times that I struggled with the mechanics, and all of them were camera-related issues. During this boss battle, one singular boss battle. The rest of the game ran smoothly, and I can honestly say the fighting was all fine. So I don't really know what game Western critics were playing when they reviewed this thing. Oddly enough, a lot of them gave Automata glowing praise, when really, it's kind of the same thing, only developed by a well-known popular developer. Yes, this first one can feel a bit sluggish and inferior, but I wouldn't say that its follow-up is leagues better. Maybe that's just me, though. The pacing is one thing that Automata handles much better. In this first entry, the player starts off building up his arsenal before it gets stripped away, as I've already said, and all things fall back and forth between the library. Go get this, go get that, home, the library, the library. Things kinda actually suck until our first companion gets introduced, and the game picks up the pace significantly and largely maintains a steady gallop until the end, with only a few speed bumps along the way. As I've said before, stylistically the game changes so much that it hardly ever has time to be boring. There are elements stripped almost wholesale from other games and genres, but that's all I'll reveal here aside from opining that they are all good. Like, very good. Yes, all of them. Hey, if you didn't like that one section, NieR might not be for you, and that's fine. Or perhaps you just need to learn how to read. That's a joke. An uncommon occurrence during a video game review, I know. It was jarring. It was a joke, I'm sorry. I apologize. Taro really made this thing tricky to get into for some. I admire his integrity, but in all honesty, in a way that isn't intended to be facetious, I totally understand why some would be turned off by this game. Personally, I loved it. Keiichi Okabe composed the soundtrack here, and it's probably the only thing about the game that everyone can agree on. It's It's breathtaking. Okabe's work here simultaneously raises the overall quality of this experience while ultimately overshadowing it, unfortunately. When it comes to video game soundtracks as a whole, NieR, as well as its sequel, Automata, are among the best. Easily top-tier contenders for the most amazing video game music of all time. So that's my recommendation for 2010's NieR. At the time of this review, a remake is in the works that appears to be more of a re-envisioned overhaul to reinvigorate the relatively confused original title based off of the success of Automata. Perhaps when that one drops, I'll do a more thorough review of this one, but until then, please find a copy of this if you're at all interested and let me know what you think.